My 15-year-old daughter broke her leg when her cousin shoved her down a flight of stone steps in Beacon Hill. My parents and my brother saw it happen. A stranger offered to call an ambulance, but my mother stopped him. Then they called Ellie dramatic, took away her phone, and forced her to finish a 3-hour walking tour in cold October rain. I did not argue when I found her. I put her in my car and drove straight to the emergency room. Less than an hour later, an orthopedic doctor showed me the scan. The bone near her ankle was fractured, and forcing her to keep walking had shifted it far enough that she would need surgery. Then the doctor asked the question my family had been trying to avoid. Who knew she was injured and made her continue? That was when Ellie finally told me Chloe had pushed her. My parents and my brother Daniel had watched it happen. I thought they were protecting Chloe from the consequences of one violent mistake, but I was wrong. Before the fall, Ellie had photographed an old accident report hidden inside my father's bag. It described another teenage girl, another injured leg, and one sentence that sounded exactly like Daniel. She kept walking, therefore the injury could not have been serious. 4 days later, my parents and brother were screaming in panic. The investigation had barely begun, but the person they planned to blame had walked into a school counselor's office carrying Ellie's phone, a locked file box, and the statement Daniel had ordered her to memorize. Stay with me to discover what my family had been hiding for 6 years, and please subscribe to the channel for more emotional family stories where the truth always finds its way out. The first thing I noticed at the pickup point was that Ellie was not standing with the other teenagers. The tour group had gathered beneath an awning at the bottom of a steep Beacon Hill street. Parents opened umbrellas while students compared photos. My daughter was several yards away, leaning against an iron railing with both hands. Her jacket was soaked through. Mud streaked one knee of her jeans, and her right foot barely touched the pavement. Daniel stood beside the tour van talking to 2 parents as though nothing unusual had happened. When he saw me hurry toward Ellie, he gave a tired laugh. "Before you panic, she slipped on a few steps," he said. "She turned it into a 3-hour production, but she finished the tour. Obviously, nothing is broken." Ellie lifted her head. Her face was so pale that her lips looked gray. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered. I put one arm around her waist. The moment I tried to help her move, she sucked in a sharp breath and gripped my shoulder. My mother, Margaret, came over wearing the expression she used whenever someone embarrassed her in public. "Do not encourage this," she said. "Ellie has always been sensitive. We taught her to finish what she started." "You made her walk like this?" "She walked because she could walk," Daniel answered. "People with broken legs do not walk for 3 hours." My father stood behind them with his hands in his coat pockets. Howard would not look directly at me. "We handled it the best way we could," he said. Chloe stood near the van beneath my father's umbrella. She did not ask whether Ellie was all right. She kept staring at the black canvas bag hanging from Daniel's shoulder. "Dad," she said quietly, "you still have her phone, right?" Daniel turned so quickly that the bag swung behind him. "That has nothing to do with this." I wanted to ask why he had my daughter's phone and who had seen her fall. Then Ellie began to shake. Her whole body trembled against mine, and her breaths came too fast. I stopped looking at Daniel and told him to give me the phone. "She was recording private business documents," he said. "Give it to me. We can discuss it when everyone is calmer." For most of my life, my family had used that word whenever they wanted time to agree on what had happened. Calm meant quiet. Calm meant waiting until their version sounded more reasonable than mine. That day, I had no interest in winning an argument beside a tour van. "Everything from now on will be in writing," I said. "Do not contact Ellie directly." My mother sighed. "Rachel, must you make a family matter sound like a legal threat?" I ignored her and helped Ellie into the passenger seat. She apologized again when I had to lift her right leg into the car. The rain blurred the narrow streets as I drove toward the emergency room. I turned up the heater and wrapped my coat over her. I asked whether she could feel her toes, whether she could move them, and whether the pain had become worse since the fall. She nodded. tears sliding down her face. "I ruined everything," she said. "Uncle Daniel said the tour might lose a school contract because of me. You did not ruin anything." I wanted every detail, but I asked only what I needed to keep her safe. I asked where the pain was strongest, whether she had hit her head, and whether she felt dizzy or sick. At the hospital, a nurse brought a wheelchair before I had finished giving Ellie's name. The swelling was so severe that she had to cut the lower part of Ellie's jeans. Purple bruising spread around the ankle and up the side of her leg. There were scrapes on both palms and a dark mark along her shoulder. "How long ago did this happen?" the nurse asked. "About 3.5 hours. And she has been walking since then?" I looked at Ellie. She lowered her eyes. "Yes." Her relatives made her finish a walking tour. The nurse's expression changed enough for me to understand that this was no longer being treated as a simple accident. Dr. Nina Patel examined Ellie before sending her for imaging. "Did you tell them you could not put weight on it?" she asked. "Yes." "Did anyone offer medical help?" Ellie hesitated and looked at me. My daughter was waiting for permission to tell the truth about people who had hurt her. "You can answer her," I said. "You are not in trouble." "A man on the tour wanted to call an ambulance," Ellie said. "Grandma told him she was my guardian and that I was having a panic attack." The scan showed a fracture close to the ankle. Dr. Patel explained that the bone had shifted and the surrounding tissue was badly irritated. Surgery was now a serious possibility. If the leg had been kept still after the fall, this may have been easier to manage, she said. Continued weight on it likely made the displacement worse. For several seconds, all I could hear was the rain tapping the window. They had watched her limp over wet stone streets, while the bone moved farther out of place. I stepped into the hallway and opened our family group chat. "Ellie is receiving emergency treatment for a fractured leg. No one is to contact her directly. Send every explanation to me in writing." Daniel replied almost immediately. Ellie slipped on wet steps. She refused assistance and voluntarily continued the tour. Everyone present can confirm this. My mother sent a message less than a minute later. She insisted she could continue. We respected her choice. My father followed. She appeared able to walk and chose to remain with the group. Different people had sent the messages, but they were telling the same carefully prepared story. They had agreed on their version before I even reached the hospital. When I returned, the medication had softened the tightness in Ellie's face. She watched me sit beside her, then glanced toward the door. "Mom, Uncle Daniel did not take my phone because of the fall." I remained quiet and let her continue. "Chloe pushed me," she said. "She was trying to grab it." "Why?" "Because I took pictures of some papers in Grandpa's bag. There was a report about another girl who got hurt on one of their tours. Her leg was injured too. Uncle Daniel wrote that she kept walking, so she could not have been seriously hurt." A cold feeling moved through me that had nothing to do with the rain. Ellie reached for my hand. "Mom, I think they made me keep walking because they had done it before." Ellie went into surgery the next morning. The orthopedic surgeon explained that he would realign the fractured bone and secure it with screws. He spoke carefully, but he did not soften the reason the procedure had become necessary. Repeated pressure on the injured leg had shifted the fracture and increased the swelling around the joint. I signed the consent forms with a hand that would not stop trembling. While nurses prepared Ellie, she kept asking whether she had done something wrong. She wanted to know whether Daniel would lose his job because of her. She worried that Grandma Margaret would cancel Christmas. She even asked whether Chloe might be taken away from her father. My daughter was lying in a hospital bed with a broken leg, yet she was trying to protect everyone who had refused to protect her. "Isat basulher and hilherhin." "None of this is your fault," I told her. "You are allowed to tell the truth, even when the truth makes other people uncomfortable." She nodded, but I could see she did not believe it yet. After the nurses wheeled her away, I sat alone in the surgical waiting room and began remembering things I had ignored. There had been weekends when Ellie came home from my parents' house quieter than usual. Once, She had returned with a bruise on her arm and said she had bumped into a door while playing with Chloe. Another time, she had refused to attend a family picnic after Chloe told everyone Ellie had cried during a school presentation. Whenever I asked questions, my mother said Ellie was too sensitive. Daniel said the girls argued like sisters. My father told me not to damage the cousins' relationship over childish disagreements. I had accepted those explanations because I wanted Ellie to have a family after losing her father. My husband Michael had died 7 years earlier after a sudden brain aneurysm. Ellie had been 8. For a long time, I had believed my parents and Daniel were helping us survive the loss. Now I wondered how many times their help had required Ellie to stay quiet. My phone began vibrating on the chair beside me. Daniel had emailed me a formal account of the accident. It was written on the letterhead of the Bennett Historical Walking Program. According to his report, Ellie had slipped on rain-covered steps while moving too quickly. She had refused medical assistance, repeatedly stated that she felt well enough to continue, and completed the tour by her own choice. He also wrote that no one had witnessed physical contact between Ellie and Chloe. At the bottom, Daniel requested that I sign a statement confirming that the family had acted appropriately based on the information available at the time. I read it twice. The document was not an apology. It was a shield. I replied with 4 sentences. I will not sign this statement. Ellie is in surgery because her fractured leg was not immobilized. Preserve all records, messages, photographs, schedules, and video connected to yesterday's tour. Future communication must remain in writing. Daniel called within 30 seconds. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, then my mother called. When I did not answer, Howard's name appeared on the screen. I almost ignored him too, but my father rarely contacted me without Margaret beside him. I stepped into an empty hallway and answered. Rachel, we need to calm this down, he said. Did Chloe push Ellie? I did not see the exact moment she fell. That is not what I asked. There were people moving around. It was raining. Everything happened quickly. Did you see her swollen leg? He paused. She said it hurt. Did anyone offer to call an ambulance? Another pause followed. A man in the group overreacted. Your mother believed an ambulance would frighten Ellie. My mother told him Ellie was having a panic attack. Ellie was upset. She had just fallen down stone stairs. Howard lowered his voice. No one wanted her to suffer. Then why did you make her walk? We did not make her. She chose to stay with the group. The sentence sounded rehearsed. Daniel had written that Ellie voluntarily continued. Margaret had texted that they respected her choice. Howard was now repeating the same claim. 3 adults had watched a 15-year-old girl struggle on an injured leg, yet every one of them suddenly remembered her making an independent and informed decision. Who told you to use that wording? I asked. I do not know what you mean. Did Daniel write the story before I picked her up? Howard's breathing changed. You are angry, and I understand that, but involving police or lawyers will hurt everyone. It already hurt Ellie. I ended the call. The surgeon came to find me almost 2 hours later. The procedure had gone well, but Ellie would need to avoid putting weight on the leg for several weeks. After that, she would begin physical therapy. He could not promise when she would return to hiking, or whether she would regain the same strength and stability. Ellie loved climbing trails with me. Every spring, we chose one new mountain to hike together. She had already marked 3 possible routes for the following year. I thanked the surgeon, then went into the restroom and cried, where my daughter could not hear me. When Ellie woke, a nurse asked whether she remembered the name of the man who had offered to call an ambulance. Ellie did not, but she remembered that he wore a red waterproof jacket and was traveling with his wife. He had seen her sitting at the bottom of the steps and told Daniel she should not be moved. My grandma said she was my legal guardian, Ellie said. She told him I had anxiety and sometimes exaggerated pain. Did your grandmother have legal guardianship papers? The nurse asked. No, she is just my grandma. The nurse wrote everything down. Ellie then described how Daniel had taken her phone. She said he told the group that phones were prohibited during the historic district portion of the tour. No one else had been asked to surrender theirs. A security employee at one of the buildings had brought out a wheelchair after seeing Ellie leaning against a wall. Daniel refused it. He said allowing Ellie to use the chair would block the narrow route and delay the group. "What happened after that?" I asked. "Grandma gave me 2 pain pills from a drugstore." "Did she ask whether you were allergic to anything?" Ellie shook her head. "She said if the medicine worked, it proved I was fine." The nurse stopped writing for a moment and looked at me. Because Ellie was a minor, and the delay in care appeared deliberate, the hospital was required to file a report with the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. The nurse explained that the report did not determine guilt. It meant an investigator would review what had happened and decide whether further action was necessary. The moment Ellie heard the word investigator, she began crying. "Can I tell them it was a misunderstanding?" she asked. "Grandma will never forgive me." I pulled my chair closer. "You do not have to protect me, Grandma, Daniel, or Chloe. You only have to tell the truth as you remember it." "What if they say I am lying?" "Then we let the evidence speak." That evening, after Ellie fell asleep, I opened the cloud account connected to her phone. Daniel still had the device, but Ellie's photographs usually uploaded automatically whenever she connected to Wi-Fi. Most of the recent files were ordinary tour pictures. Brick houses, narrow streets, iron balconies, autumn leaves shining in the rain. Then I found an image that had failed to upload completely. Only the upper half was visible. It showed a yellowed report inside a plastic sleeve. A date from 6 years earlier appeared near the top. Beneath it was the name of a 16-year-old girl, Ava Mercer. The bottom half of the photograph was blurred, but one sentence remained readable. "The participant continued walking for more than 2 hours after the alleged incident, which is inconsistent with a serious injury." I read the sentence again. It was the same argument Daniel had used at the pickup point. "People with broken legs do not walk for 3 hours." I enlarged the photograph and noticed handwriting in the margin. Someone had circled the sentence in red ink and written 3 words beside it. "This is false." Below those words were the initials L.M. Laura Mercer was not related to the girl in the report. Laura was Daniel's former wife and Chloe's mother. According to Daniel, Laura had abandoned them years ago and wanted nothing to do with her daughter. But if Laura had seen this report, challenged it, and marked it as false, then she had known what Daniel had done. I looked at Ellie sleeping beneath the hospital blanket and realized the photograph was not merely evidence of an old accident. It might explain why Laura had disappeared from Chloe's life. The initials beside the sentence belonged to Laura Mitchell, Daniel's former wife and Chloe's mother. Ava Mercer was the girl named in the report. They were not related, but Laura had clearly read the document and challenged Daniel's account before she disappeared from Chloe's life. I searched for Ava's name while Ellie slept. The first results were ordinary school announcements from 6 years earlier. Ava had been a junior at a public high school outside Boston. She ran cross-country, played soccer, and had been selected for a summer leadership program. Then her name stopped appearing in sports results halfway through the school year. A local community page contained one photograph of Ava standing beside her team. She wore a knee brace and leaned slightly toward the girl next to her. The caption congratulated her for returning to school after an injury. There was no article about the accident, no public complaint against the Bennett Historical Walking Program, no record explaining why a 16-year-old athlete had vanished from every team roster after one of Daniel's tours. I searched the program's archived safety reports. The year Ava was injured contained only 3 minor incidents. One involved a scraped hand. Another involved dehydration. The third described a participant who had slipped, declined assistance, and completed the route without difficulty. There was no mention of a fracture. The following morning, Ellie was awake when I arrived with breakfast. She had slept badly and looked exhausted, but the color had returned to her face. Her leg rested inside a rigid splint, elevated above the mattress. I showed her the damaged photograph from her cloud account. Is this the paper you saw? She nodded. There were more pages behind it. Some had letters clipped to them. Do you remember any names? Ava was on the first page. Laura's name was on some of the letters. I did not know who she was until Chloe saw them. What did Chloe do? She grabbed the papers and asked Grandpa why he still had them. He told her to put everything back. Then she saw me taking pictures. Ellie closed her eyes for a moment. She looked scared before she got angry. Did she say anything about Laura? She said her mother was a liar and had abandoned her. Then she told me I had no right to photograph family documents. What happened next? I tried to leave. She reached for my phone, and I pulled it back. She shoved me. I do not know whether she meant for me to fall all the way down. I did not ask Ellie to decide Chloe's intention. The fact that Chloe might not have planned the fall did not change what happened afterward. Who came to you first? Grandpa. He asked whether I had hit my head. Then Uncle Daniel ran down and took my phone. Did anyone check your leg? Grandpa touched my ankle. I screamed, and Grandma told me to stop frightening the other people. Ellie looked toward the closed hospital door. Uncle Daniel asked how many pictures had uploaded. That was before he asked if I could stand. That detail mattered more than Daniel probably realized. His first concern had not been Ellie's injury. It had been the report. Before I could ask another question, a nurse entered and told me my mother was at the front desk. Margaret had brought flowers, a stuffed bear, and a bag of Ellie's favorite cookies. She had also brought a printed document for me to sign. I met her in the family waiting area, instead of allowing her into Ellie's room. You are keeping me from my granddaughter, she said. Ellie does not want visitors. She is 15. She does not get to make decisions based on temporary emotions. She gets to decide who enters her hospital room. Margaret placed the flowers on a table with more force than necessary. We made one judgment call in bad weather. Daniel has already explained everything. Daniel wrote a report before a doctor examined Ellie. He manages a business. Documentation is his responsibility. He also took her phone. She photographed confidential records. What happened to Ava Mercer? My mother's expression changed for less than a second. Then she reached for the document in her bag. I have no idea who that is. You knew the name before I finished saying it. Rachel. I am not playing games with you. Neither am I. She pushed the paper toward me. It was a release prepared for the program's insurance carrier. It stated that Ellie's fall had been accidental, that medical assistance had been offered, and that I accepted responsibility for any treatment obtained after she left the tour. I slid it back without reading the final paragraph. I will not sign anything. You are allowing your grief and guilt to control you. The words struck exactly where she intended. Margaret had always known how to make my doubts sound like evidence against me. You lost Michael, and since then you have treated every problem involving Ellie as an emergency, she continued. Daniel is trying to protect a program that employs 12 people. You are willing to destroy it because a teenager slipped. My daughter needed surgery. No one knew that. You knew she was in enough pain to buy medication. My mother stared at me. Ellie had not mentioned the drugstore in front of Margaret after I arrived. The only way I knew about it was through the hospital interview. I do not know what Ellie told those nurses, she said, but children remember events differently when adults lead them. That was the moment I understood why she had come. The flowers were not for Ellie. Margaret wanted to know what had already been documented. You are not going into her room, I said. Her face hardened. I am her grandmother. You were her grandmother when she begged for help. She picked up her bag but left the flowers behind. You are making a mistake that will divide this family permanently. You made that choice on the steps. After she left, I photographed the unsigned release and sent it to the investigator assigned to the hospital report. I also forwarded Daniel's written account and the 3 nearly identical messages from my family. I did not claim they proved a crime. I simply preserved them before anyone could change the wording. Later that afternoon, Daniel emailed again. His tone had softened. He wrote that the insurance company wanted to cover Ellie's medical bills quickly and quietly. He said the staff should not lose their jobs because of a disagreement among relatives. He offered to pay the deductible from his personal account if I signed the release by the end of the day. I replied that no settlement would be discussed until the full medical impact was known and Ellie's phone was returned. Daniel did not respond. I called the city office responsible for permits connected to guided commercial tours. The woman who answered could not discuss private complaints, but she confirmed that the Bennett program had reported no serious participant injuries during the past 8 years. I then contacted the hospital listed on one of Ava's old community posts. Privacy rules prevented anyone from sharing medical details, but the records department explained how Ava could request her own files if she chose to speak with me. Finding her current contact information took longer. Ava's mother, Denise Mercer, still lived at the same address listed in an old-school directory. I found a public business email connected to her bookkeeping service and sent a careful message. I did not include accusations. I said my daughter had been injured during a Bennett walking tour and that I had found a report bearing Ava's name. Denise replied 2 hours later. "Do not contact my daughter again. We settled this years ago." The wording told me 3 things. Ava had been seriously affected. The family had reached some kind of agreement. Denise believed reopening the matter would hurt her daughter. I wrote back only once. "I will respect your request. My daughter was forced to walk for 3 hours on a fractured leg. The report we found says Ava also continued walking after her injury. I am trying to understand whether the same people used the same reasoning twice." No answer came that night. The next morning, I received a voicemail from a man named Peter Lawson. He said he had worked as an assistant guide for Daniel 6 years earlier. Denise had forwarded my email because Peter was the only former employee who had tried to support Ava's family. I returned the call from the hospital cafeteria. Peter remembered Ava falling near a stone stairway after the group had stopped for lunch. She complained of severe pain and asked to call her mother. Daniel told her the nearest vehicle could not reach the route and encouraged her to walk to the next stop. "She was crying by the second block," Peter said. "I wanted to end the tour." Daniel said stopping would cause panic and expose the program to liability. "Did she receive medical care?" "Not until her mother picked her up." Daniel made sure people took pictures of Ava standing with the group before she left. "Why?" He said the photographs would prove she was mobile. Peter had given a statement to the insurance investigator, but the final report described Ava's injury as an ordinary fall. His concerns were reduced to one sentence saying a junior employee had been overly cautious. "Laura was the only person inside the family who challenged Daniel," he said. "She found the original incident notes and realized he had rewritten them." "What happened to those notes?" "I thought Laura took copies." A few months later, she and Daniel were in court over Chloe. Then Laura disappeared from everything connected to the business. Peter still had one email from that period. Laura had asked him whether he would testify that Daniel pressured staff to change their accounts. Peter agreed, but no attorney ever contacted him. He forwarded the email to me. At the bottom, Laura had written one final line. "If Daniel succeeds in making Ava look dishonest, he will do this again." I returned to Ellie's room with that sentence in my mind. She was looking through old photographs on her tablet when she suddenly stopped. "Mom, I remembered something Grandpa said." "When?" "After I fell. Uncle Daniel was telling Grandma not to call anyone. Grandpa looked at my leg and said they could not let the old situation happen again." "Did he say Ava's name?" "No. Uncle Daniel told him to be quiet." My father had claimed he barely understood what was happening. In reality, he had recognized the pattern immediately. That evening, Howard called me from a number I did not know. "Your mother cannot know I contacted you," he said. "What do you want?" "You need to stop looking for Laura." "Why?" "Because Chloe believes her mother abandoned her. If you bring Laura back into this, you will destroy that girl." "Did Laura abandon her?" Howard said nothing. "Dad, did Laura leave Chloe willingly?" His answer came so quietly that I nearly missed it. "No." Before I could ask anything else, the call ended. My father had just admitted that Laura did not leave Chloe willingly, then ended the call before I could ask what that meant. I called the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. When I tried Howard's regular phone, he did not answer. 10 minutes later, my mother sent me a message asking whether I had spoken to him. I did not respond. Howard had spent years surviving our family by avoiding conflict. He rarely told a direct lie. Instead, he stayed silent, while Margaret and Daniel decided what everyone else was allowed to believe. His admission did not make him brave. It only proved that he knew more than he had said. I returned to Ellie's room and found her staring at the ceiling. The hospital had stopped most of the stronger medication, and the pain had begun to break through again. "Did Grandpa call?" she asked. I sat beside her. "He did." "Is he angry with me?" The question made something inside me tighten. "No, he is afraid." "Of Uncle Daniel?" "Maybe. Or maybe he is afraid of admitting what he helped hide." Ellie turned toward the window. Rain slid down the glass in thin lines, blurring the buildings across the street. "Grandpa saw my leg," she said. "He knew." I did not defend him. Ellie had heard enough excuses from adults. That afternoon, the hospital discharged her with crutches, medication, and strict instructions not to put weight on her right leg. At home, I moved a mattress into the downstairs study because the bedrooms were on the second floor. Ellie tried to joke that she had always wanted her own private apartment, but the smile disappeared when she saw the stairs. For the first 2 nights, she woke whenever she began to fall asleep. Each time, she grabbed the edge of the mattress and cried out before realizing she was safe. In one dream, she was back at the bottom of the stone steps, while my family stood above her, telling her to get up. During the day, she apologized whenever she needed help. She apologized when I carried her food, when I adjusted the pillows beneath her leg, and when I canceled work meetings to stay home. On the 3rd morning, I put down the glass of water she had requested and sat across from her. "You have said sorry 11 times since breakfast." She looked embarrassed. "I do not want to be difficult." "Who told you needing help makes you difficult?" She did not answer. I already knew. For years, Margaret had praised Chloe for being confident, while describing Ellie as sensitive. Daniel called Chloe competitive, and Ellie jealous. Whenever Chloe insulted her cousin, the adults said she was joking. Whenever Ellie reacted, they accused her of causing tension. I had noticed the pattern, but I had not understood how deeply it had shaped my daughter. I had continued sending her to family events because I believed distance would leave us even more alone after Michael's death. My desire to preserve a family had taught Ellie to endure one that did not make her feel safe. That realization was harder to face than my anger at Daniel. Later that morning, my phone filled with messages from relatives. Daniel had told them I was trying to destroy the family business because of an accident. One aunt wrote that 12 employees could lose their jobs. A cousin asked why I was blaming Chloe for something no one had witnessed. Someone had also shared a photograph of Ellie taken before the fall. She was smiling beside Chloe near the start of the tour. Margaret added the caption, "Ellie was happy and healthy all morning. Please do not believe the cruel story now being spread about our family." They were building the same defense they had used against Ava. First, they would show that Ellie had been happy. Then they would suggest she was unstable, dramatic, or influenced by me. If they could make people question her character, they would not need to explain their own behavior. I saved every post and message. Around noon, an email arrived from Laura Mitchell. The subject line contained only my name. Her message was brief. "I received your email. Before I agree to speak with you, I need to know whether you supported Daniel during the custody case." I read the questions several times before answering. I told her the truth. Daniel had said she suffered severe emotional problems, became unpredictable, and stopped attending scheduled visits. Margaret claimed Laura once left Chloe alone during an anxiety episode. Howard said very little, which I had mistaken for confirmation. I admitted that I never contacted Laura to hear her side. At the time, I had been grieving Michael and caring for Ellie, but that did not excuse my silence. Laura replied 2 hours later. We can meet tomorrow. Public place. No Daniel. No recording without my knowledge. We agreed on a quiet coffee shop near Cambridge. Laura was already seated when I arrived. She was 41, with dark hair pulled into a loose knot and the guarded expression of someone who had spent years expecting every conversation to be used against her. She did not offer her hand. "How much did Daniel tell you?" she asked. "That you left because you did not want to be a mother." Her mouth tightened. "I filed for custody modifications 4 times. She opened a folder and placed copies of court documents on the table. Laura had petitioned for supervised contact, then regular visitation. Daniel responded by accusing her of harassment and emotional instability. He obtained a temporary restraining order after claiming she had threatened to remove Chloe from the state. "I never made that threat," Laura said. "He used an email where I wrote that I wanted to take Chloe away from the conflict. He removed the rest of the paragraph." She had hired 2 attorneys over 6 years. Daniel used money from the family business to answer every filing, request additional evaluations, and delay hearings. Laura spent her savings, sold her car, and eventually represented herself. The restraining order did not permanently forbid all contact, but it allowed Daniel to control how letters and gifts were delivered. He returned most packages. Others were accepted and never given to Chloe. "Why did you stop fighting?" I asked. "I did not stop. I ran out of money, and every failed filing became proof that I was obsessed. The court kept asking for evidence that Daniel had manipulated the original case. The evidence was inside a file box I could no longer access. The one Ellie found." Laura nodded. "The original report from Ava's accident was in that box. So were Peter Lawson's first notes, Daniel's rewritten version, and letters between the insurer and the program. I copied some pages, but Daniel found out before I could take the entire file." She looked down at her hands. "When I confronted him, he told me Ava's family had accepted a settlement and that nothing could be changed. I said I would report him anyway. 2 weeks later, he began documenting every argument we had as evidence that I was unstable. Margaret helped him. She gave a statement saying I frightened Chloe. Howard knew it was false, but he refused to contradict her." Laura had not been a perfect parent. She admitted that she had suffered severe anxiety after Chloe's birth and later experienced panic attacks during the custody fight. Daniel did not invent those problems. He took real vulnerabilities and turned them into proof that nothing she said could be trusted. "I sent Chloe a letter every month for the first 2 years, Laura said. After that, I sent them on birthdays and holidays because the returned envelopes were destroying me. I kept copies of everyone." She removed a blue envelope from the folder. Chloe's name was written across the front in careful handwriting. The postmark was 5 years old. The seal had never been opened. Inside, Laura had written about Chloe's first day of middle school. She said she hoped Chloe still loved astronomy, and that she had saved the small telescope they once used together. The letter did not criticize Daniel or ask Chloe to choose sides. It ended with the same sentence repeated in several later letters. "You were never abandoned. I am still here." I thought about Chloe standing beneath Howard's umbrella, asking whether Daniel still had Ellie's phone. She had shoved my daughter, and then helped conceal the truth. She had to face consequences for that. But she had also spent 6 years believing her mother had chosen to disappear. "What exactly happened with Ava?" I asked. Laura closed the folder. "Ava fell during a tour Daniel was leading. She said she could not walk. Peter wanted to call her mother, but Daniel was afraid an ambulance would trigger an incident review. He convinced everyone that Ava needed encouragement, not medical care. He forced her to continue. He called it building resilience." The phrase sounded like Margaret. When Ava's mother later reported the fracture, Daniel changed the internal notes. He emphasized that Ava had walked for more than 2 hours and posed for a photograph. He described her as anxious and prone to exaggeration. Laura found the original notes and confronted him. That was when she realized the photograph had not been taken casually. Daniel had instructed a staff member to make sure Ava was standing. He wanted visible proof that contradicted her medical claim, Laura said. Then he did the same thing to Ellie. Laura looked at me. Did someone photograph her after the fall? I remembered the group picture Howard had mentioned. I did not have it, but Daniel might. Before leaving, Laura gave me copies of her court filings, returned envelopes, and the email she had sent Peter asking him to testify. She did not give me the original letters to Chloe. I want her to read them, Laura said. But I will not use Ellie's injury as a way to force myself back into my daughter's life. It was the first time anyone connected to Daniel had placed a child's emotional safety above their own need to win. When I returned home, Ellie was sitting on the mattress with an old photo album open beside her. She pointed to a picture from a family picnic 3 years earlier. Chloe stood between Daniel and Margaret. Laura was absent, as she was from every photograph after Chloe turned 10. Mom, did Chloe's mother really abandon her? No. Ellie studied my face. Does Chloe know? I do not think so. Her eyes filled with conflicting emotions. Chloe had hurt her. The truth about Laura did not erase that. It only made the lie surrounding Chloe larger. That evening, Howard sent me a photograph from an unknown email address. It showed the tour group standing outside a brick building less than an hour after Ellie's fall. Ellie was at the end of the row, leaning heavily against a railing. Her right ankle was visibly swollen above her shoe. Chloe stood several feet away, and Daniel was smiling at the camera. Beneath the photograph, Howard had written one sentence. Daniel insisted we needed proof that she could still stand. The method was no longer merely similar to Ava's case. It was exactly the same. The photograph Howard sent me changed the shape of the entire case. Until that moment, Daniel could still claim he had made a terrible decision under pressure. He could say he underestimated Ellie's injury, believed she was frightened rather than seriously hurt, or trusted my mother's judgment. The photograph proved something colder. Less than an hour after the fall, when Ellie's ankle was already visibly swollen, Daniel had arranged evidence to support the story he intended to tell later. He had done the same thing to Ava 6 years earlier. I saved the original email, downloaded the photograph, and sent copies to the investigator handling the hospital report. I also forwarded it to the attorney I had hired that morning. Her name was Karen Wu, and she specialized in cases involving child safety and institutional negligence. Karen warned me not to contact Daniel about the picture. If he does not know you have it, let him continue writing, she said. People reveal more when they believe they still control the record. Daniel had already created several versions of that record. In his first email, Ellie had slipped and voluntarily continued. In the release Margaret brought to the hospital, medical assistance had supposedly been offered. In a message sent to our relatives, Daniel claimed Ellie had laughed with Chloe after the fall and completed the tour without difficulty. Each version added a detail that made him appear more careful and Ellie less credible. Karen asked me to make a timeline, using only facts I could verify. I began with the time-stamped photographs on Ellie's cloud account. The first showed the tour group near the Massachusetts State House shortly before noon. The incomplete photograph of Ava's report was taken at 12:18. Ellie's fall happened several minutes later. Howard's group picture was taken at 1:07. A pharmacy receipt later found in Margaret's coat pocket showed she purchased pain medication at 1:26. The tour ended shortly after 4. For nearly 3 hours, they knew Ellie was in enough pain to need medication. They knew a stranger had offered to call an ambulance. They knew a security employee had brought out a wheelchair. They still forced her to continue. The timeline did not depend on anyone's memory. It came from photographs, receipts, and electronic records created before my family had time to rewrite the day. Ellie was home from the hospital, but recovery had not brought relief. Her leg throbbed whenever the medication began wearing off. She hated needing help to reach the bathroom, and became frustrated when she could not carry a glass of water while using crutches. The emotional damage was harder to manage. Whenever my phone rang, she asked whether it was Daniel. When someone knocked at the door, her entire body stiffened. She had begun checking the family group chat from her tablet, even though I told her she did not need to read what people were saying. One afternoon, I found her staring at a message from Margaret. "Your grandfather is not sleeping because of what you have accused him of. Families survive mistakes by forgiving each other, not by collecting evidence." Ellie looked up at me. "Grandma makes it sound like I am hurting Grandpa. That is because she wants you to feel responsible for his choices. What if he really did not know what to do? He knew enough to send me that photograph in secret." Ellie did not know Howard had contacted me. I showed her the picture but covered the email address. She studied the image for a long time. "I remember that," she said. "I told Uncle Daniel I could not stand. He said the picture would take 5 seconds. Did anyone hold you up?" Grandpa put my hand on the railing. "Grandma told me to stop making my face look miserable." The photograph had been planned in more detail than I realized. Ellie then pointed to a woman standing near the edge of the group. She was the one who asked if I needed an ambulance. The woman wore a red rain jacket. Karen suggested we ask the tour participants to preserve their photos and videos without telling them exactly what we were seeking. The program's booking page did not list individual customers, but several guests had tagged the business in public social media posts. I recognized the woman in red in a photograph uploaded by her husband. Her name was Susan Caldwell. I sent a brief message explaining that Ellie had been seriously injured during the tour and asking whether Susan remembered the incident. Susan called me that evening. She had seen Ellie lying at the bottom of the steps. Her husband wanted to call emergency services, but Margaret said she was Ellie's legal guardian and that Ellie experienced panic attacks. "I believed her for a few minutes," Susan admitted. "Then I saw your daughter try to stand. Something was clearly wrong." Susan had recorded part of the argument because Daniel became hostile when her husband continued offering help. The video did not show Chloe pushing Ellie, but it captured Daniel saying they could not delay the entire group over teenage dramatics. It also captured Howard asking whether they should call Rachel. My mother answered before anyone else could speak. "If Rachel hears about this, before Ellie calms down, she will turn it into an emergency." I watched the clip twice, then stopped. Hearing Margaret discuss me as an obstacle while Ellie cried in the background made my hands shake. Susan agreed to preserve the original file and provide it to investigators. Before ending the call, she apologized for walking away with the group. "I thought her family would take care of her," she said. "So did I." The following day, Laura came to my house with another part of Ava's file. She had found it among documents stored after her second custody case. It was not the full original report, but it contained an early draft written by Peter Lawson on the day of Ava's accident. Peter's account said Ava could not bear weight on her left leg, requested that her mother be called, and cried repeatedly during the walk to the next stop. It also stated that Daniel rejected a staff member's suggestion to end the tour. The final report Daniel submitted removed all of those details. It said Ava appeared anxious but remained mobile. It described her as reluctant to participate and suggested her distress was unrelated to the fall. Laura placed the 2 pages side by side. "He did not just remove the evidence," she said. "He changed her pain into a character problem." I thought about the words my family had used for Ellie. Sensitive, dramatic, difficult, jealous. Every label moved attention away from what adults had done and placed it on the child's personality. Laura also brought copies Yushin emails Daniel exchanged with the program's insurer. In one, an adjuster asked whether the whether the staff had reason to believe Ava needed immediate medical attention. Daniel replied that she had continued walking, smiled in a group photograph, and never clearly requested an ambulance. Peter's original notes contradicted all 3 claims. "Did the insurer ever see this version?" I asked. "No. Daniel told them Peter had revised his account after Ava's mother pressured him. Peter had not revised anything. Daniel had replaced it. Laura believed the original file box contained a signed copy of Peter's first statement and notes showing Margaret had called Ava's mother before the settlement. If those documents were still inside, they could prove the family had coordinated their account before the insurer completed its review. The problem was that Daniel still had the box. That evening, Howard contacted me again. He did not call this time. He sent a message from another unfamiliar number. I am willing to explain the photograph, but I cannot do it while Margaret is present. I called immediately. Where is Ellie's phone? I asked. Daniel has it. And the file box? It was in my study. Daniel removed it after the hospital contacted us. Where did he take it? I do not know. You do know what was inside. Howard remained silent. Dad, you saw what happened to Ava. You saw what happened to Ellie. How many times do you expect everyone else to pay for your fear of Mom? His voice sounded strained. I told Daniel we should call an ambulance. Margaret said if emergency vehicles arrived, the city would suspend the tour until there was a review. Daniel said Ellie could walk, and that we needed to keep her moving. Why? He said if she completed the route, no one could later claim we knew the injury was serious. The sentence matched what Laura remembered Daniel saying 6 years earlier. Did Chloe push her? I saw Chloe reach for the phone. Then, Ellie fell. That is not an answer. Yes, he whispered. Chloe pushed her. For the first time, one of the adults who witnessed the fall had admitted the truth. I asked Howard to provide a written statement. He immediately began retreating. He said Margaret depended on him. He said Chloe was already frightened. He said a public accusation could destroy the family. You are still asking the injured child to carry the consequences, I told him. You just want to feel sorry while she does it. I ended the call before he could explain his fear again. The next morning, Ellie received a message through a school account. It came from Chloe. I did not mean for you to fall that far. Please do not tell them about the box. Dad says everything will be fine if we all stick to the same story. Ellie handed me the tablet without replying. Chloe had admitted there was a shared story. She had also confirmed that the missing file box mattered. I photographed the message and sent it to Karen. Less than an hour later, Chloe deleted it, but the copy was already preserved. That afternoon, Laura called with another discovery. She had compared Daniel's report about Ellie with the final report from Ava's case. Several sentences were nearly identical. Both reports said the injured girl had remained mobile, declined assistance, and completed the route voluntarily. Both described the pain as inconsistent with the participants' behavior. Both suggested the complaint became serious only after a parent became involved. Daniel had not merely repeated an old mistake. He had opened the same report, changed the name, changed the date, and used it again. By the 4th day after Ellie's surgery, Daniel's story was beginning to collapse, but he still believed he could control who would be blamed when it did. The copied language in the 2 accident reports gave Karen a clear reason to ask investigators to examine the earlier case. It did not yet prove every accusation, but it showed that Daniel had responded to 2 injured teenage girls with the same sequence. He minimized the pain, kept the tour moving, created photographs of the victim standing, and later described the child as emotional or unreliable. Karen submitted the reports, Susan Caldwell's video, Chloe's deleted message, and Howard's photograph to the DCF investigator. She also advised me to make a report with Boston police regarding the shove, the missing phone, and the possible destruction of electronic evidence. I was giving my statement by phone when Ellie called for me from the study. She was sitting upright on the mattress with her tablet in both hands. Her face had lost its color again. Chloe sent another message. This one came from a different school account. Dad says, I have to tell them you grabbed me first. He says, if I do not follow the statement, I will be sent away until this is over. A second message arrived before we could respond. He says the adults never saw me touch you. He says this can all be treated as a fight between cousins. Ellie stared at the screen. I did not grab her. I know. She is going to say I did. She may be frightened, but that does not change the truth. Ellie began typing, then stopped. What should I tell her? I wanted Chloe to return the phone and the file box. I wanted her to admit everything in writing before Daniel could take away her access again. But Chloe was 16, isolated inside a house, controlled by the same adults who had trained her to lie. If I pressured her, Daniel could later claim I had manipulated his daughter. Tell her to speak to a trusted adult at school, I said. A counselor, teacher, or nurse. Do not ask her to bring us anything, and do not promise that she will avoid consequences. Ellie wrote carefully. You should tell the truth to someone your dad cannot interrupt. I will not lie about what happened, but I do not want him to hurt you either. Chloe did not answer. An hour later, Howard called Karen, instead of contacting me. He refused to give a formal statement, but he warned her that Daniel was preparing what he called a final version of events. According to Howard, Daniel had written statements for all three adults, and a separate one for Chloe. Margaret's version said she was attending to other guests and did not see the fall. Howard said he arrived only after Ellie had stood up. Daniel claimed he was farther down the route, and had relied on the girl's explanation that Ellie slipped during an argument. Only Chloe's statement admitted physical contact. Daniel wanted her to say Ellie grabbed her jacket, tried to take the file box, and lost her balance when Chloe pushed her hands away. He was turning the adults into distant witnesses and the teenagers into equal participants. Karen asked why Howard was telling her this, if he still refused to put his name on a statement. Howard said, because Daniel is going to let Chloe take all of it. That answer did not earn him sympathy. He had watched Daniel prepare to blame Ava 6 years earlier. He had watched the same thing happen to Ellie. He was speaking now, only because Daniel had finally chosen a victim Howard was unwilling to sacrifice. When Karen repeated the conversation to me, Ellie was listening from the doorway. Grandpa cares now, because it is Chloe, she said. There was no anger in her voice. That made it worse. I helped her back to the mattress and adjusted the support beneath her leg. The doctor had warned us that swelling and pain would fluctuate, but Ellie became anxious every time the ache increased. She worried another movement might damage the repair. That afternoon, a visiting physical therapist showed her how to move safely between the mattress, a chair, and the bathroom. Ellie completed the first transfer without putting weight on her injured leg. During the second attempt, the crutch slipped slightly on the floor. She froze. I cannot do it. The therapist told her to pause and breathe. No one told her to push through the fear. No one called her dramatic. We waited until she chose to try again. Afterward, Ellie admitted that the fall itself was not the memory that frightened her most. It was when Grandma pulled me up, she said. I told her something was wrong, but she said everyone was watching. Then Uncle Daniel told me to take 3 steps, so he could see whether I was really hurt. I sat beside her. Did you fall again? Almost. Grandpa caught me. What did Daniel say? He said I had proved his point. The family had not simply ignored an injury. They had conducted their own cruel test and decided that a terrified child taking 3 forced steps meant she did not deserve medical care. That evening, Laura called to ask whether Chloe had contacted us. I told her only that Chloe appeared afraid and had been encouraged to speak with a school counselor. Laura did not ask me to arrange a meeting. She did not ask Ellie to persuade Chloe to choose her mother. She simply said Chloe used to hide inside the school library whenever conflict at home became overwhelming. Daniel hates situations he cannot manage in private, Laura said. If Chloe speaks at school, he cannot decide what everyone hears first. Laura also explained the threat of sending Chloe away. Daniel had used private schools and treatment programs as warnings before. During the custody case, he claimed Chloe needed stability and that Laura's attempts to contact her caused emotional setbacks. If Chloe resisted him now, he could describe her fear as evidence she needed intensive supervision. He will tell her it is for her protection, Laura said. Then he will remove her from anyone who might hear the truth. I thought of the message Daniel had ordered Chloe to memorize. He was not only preparing a defense, he was preparing to isolate the one person who could contradict it. The next morning, Daniel sent me an email marked confidential settlement discussion. He offered to return Ellie's phone, reimburse all medical expenses, and issue a private apology if I confirmed that Chloe's shove had been accidental and that the adults did not recognize the seriousness of the injury. He did not mention the file box. Karen instructed me not to accept or reject the proposal immediately. She sent a preservation demand directing Daniel and the tour program not to delete, alter, or dispose of any records related to Ellie or Ava. Within 20 minutes, Daniel called my office repeatedly. When I finally answered, Karen was on the line with me. "You are dragging an old family dispute into a child's accident," he said. "You used an old report to write the new one. That is a standard template. A template for forcing injured girls to continue walking? You have no idea what happened with Ava. Then return the original file." His silence lasted long enough to answer the question. "You are frightening Chloe," he said. "She believes you want her arrested. I want her to tell the truth. She is a minor who panicked during an argument. You are willing to ruin her life because you have always resented the way Mom and Dad supported me." The accusation was familiar. Whenever Daniel could not defend his behavior, he turned the conversation into a story about my jealousy. "What did you tell Chloe would happen if she refused to sign your statement?" "That is none of your business. It became my business when she pushed my daughter, and you made Ellie walk on a broken leg." Daniel's voice changed. "If you continue, Chloe will say Ellie attacked her first. There were no cameras on the stairs. Your daughter's version is not the only one that matters." Karen ended the call before I could respond. She had heard enough. Daniel had just confirmed that Chloe's statement depended on whether I cooperated. That afternoon, the DCF investigator contacted me to schedule a formal interview with Ellie, once her doctor considered her well enough. The investigator made it clear that DCF would examine the actions of the adults who were responsible for her during the tour. Boston police would separately determine whether the shove, missing phone, or altered records required further investigation. There would be no dramatic meeting where everyone sat around one table. Each person would be questioned separately. Each statement would be compared with the medical timeline and preserved evidence. For the first time, Daniel would not be able to correct my parents' answers while they were speaking. At 3:20 that afternoon, my phone rang from Ellie's school. The caller was the guidance counselor, Miss Ramirez. She asked whether I was in a safe place to speak. Then she told me Chloe had arrived at her office during lunch in a state of panic. Chloe said she could not return home until she had spoken to someone who was legally required to report what she knew. She had brought 3 things with her: Ellie's phone, the locked file box from Howard's study, and the statement Daniel had ordered her to memorize. Before Miss Ramirez ended the call, I heard shouting in the school reception area. Daniel had arrived and was demanding that the staff return his daughter and his property. My mother was with him, screaming that Chloe had stolen confidential family documents and that I had manipulated both girls. 4 days after Ellie was forced to walk on a broken leg, my family was finally panicking. Not because they were sorry. They were panicking because the child they planned to blame had carried the truth somewhere they could no longer control it. By the time I reached Ellie's school, Daniel was still arguing with the receptionist. He stood in the front office with rainwater darkening the shoulders of his coat. Margaret was beside him, speaking loudly enough for every parent and staff member in the hallway to hear. "My granddaughter is emotionally distressed," she said. "That woman has been feeding both girls lies." When Daniel saw me, his face changed from anger to calculation. "Tell them to release Chloe," he said. "This is a family matter." The school principal stepped between us. "Chloe asked to speak with a counselor and stated that she did not feel safe leaving with you. We have contacted the appropriate authorities." Daniel looked at me as though I had arranged the entire scene. "What did you promise her?" "I have not spoken to Chloe. You expect me to believe she stole documents, came here, and asked for you without encouragement? She did not ask for me. She asked for someone you could not control. Margaret moved toward me, but the principal told her to remain where she was. A school resource officer had already arrived. He was not there to arrest anyone. His job was to prevent Daniel from removing Chloe before DCF determined what should happen next. Miss Ramirez met me in a conference room away from the front office. Chloe was not with her. The counselor explained that Chloe was being supervised in another room and would be interviewed without Daniel, Margaret, Laura, or me present. The 3 items she had brought were on the table. Ellie's phone was inside a clear evidence bag. The black metal file box sat beside it. The final item was a 4-page typed statement with Chloe's name printed at the bottom. I did not touch any of them. Miss Ramirez said Chloe had arrived trembling and carrying the box inside a gym bag. She first claimed she wanted to return property to Ellie. Then she admitted her father had ordered her to sign a statement that blamed Ellie for starting the confrontation. She said he told her that everyone would be safe if she remembered the story correctly, Miss Ramirez said. Did she sign it? No. The printed statement described Ellie as jealous, aggressive, and determined to expose confidential family information. It claimed Ellie grabbed Chloe's sleeve, pulled her toward the stairs, and lost her balance when Chloe tried to free herself. The adults were placed far enough away in the story that none of them could confirm or deny the shove. They would only arrive after Ellie had already stood up. Daniel had written a version that protected every adult and left his daughter carrying the only possible criminal responsibility. I recognized several phrases from his emails. Voluntarily continued. Declined medical assistance. Displayed no visible sign of serious injury. He had built the entire statement from language already used against Ava and Ellie. The counselor told me DCF had requested that the school preserve the items exactly as Chloe delivered them. Boston police would determine whether the phone or documents contained relevant evidence. I asked only one question. Is Chloe safe right now? Miss Ramirez nodded. She is frightened, but she is cooperating. I did not ask to see her. Chloe had injured my daughter, and Ellie deserved to decide whether any future contact occurred. At the same time, I was not going to become another adult who treated Chloe's fear as an inconvenience. When I returned home, Ellie was waiting for me. Did she bring the phone? Yes. And the box? Yes. Ellie let out a breath, but she did not look relieved. What happens to Chloe now? I do not know yet. She will be interviewed separately. The adults will be investigated too. She still pushed me. I know. I feel sorry for her, and I hate that I feel sorry for her. You can understand why someone is afraid without excusing what they did. Ellie looked down at her cast. I do not want everyone to decide she is innocent because her dad is worse. They will not hear that from me. The next morning, Karen called to explain what the investigators had recovered from the phone. Daniel had deleted the recent photographs and several messages, but he had not erased everything. Some files had already synchronized with Ellie's cloud account. Others remained in temporary storage. The phone did not contain a clear video of Chloe pushing Ellie. It did contain 6 photographs of the old file, including one page we had not seen before. The page was an internal incident note signed by Peter Lawson on the day of Ava's fall. It stated that Ava repeatedly said she could not bear weight on her leg and requested medical help. A handwritten instruction in the margin told staff to replace the page with a revised summary before submitting the file to the insurer. The initials beside the instruction belonged to Daniel. Another photograph showed an email Laura had printed 6 years earlier. In it, she warned Howard that changing the report could expose the program to fraud allegations. Howard replied that he agreed the report was inaccurate, but asked Laura not to force the family into a public scandal. His fear had been documented long before Ellie fell. The investigators also recovered part of an audio recording. Ellie had opened the camera application while photographing the documents. When Chloe grabbed the phone, the camera stopped, but the microphone continued recording for less than 2 minutes. The sound was chaotic. There were footsteps, Ellie crying out, and several voices speaking at once. Chloe said, "I did not mean to push her." Howard said, "Her ankle is swelling." Then Daniel's voice became clear. "No ambulance. If she walks the rest of the route, this stays a minor fall." The recording did not contain every detail, but it proved Daniel knew about the shove, saw the injury, and connected the decision to keep Ellie walking with minimizing the incident. Karen paused before telling me the final recovered sentence. Margaret said, "We handled Ava this way and the claim went away." I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wall. My mother had not merely followed Daniel's lead. She remembered exactly what happened to Ava and deliberately repeated it with her own granddaughter. The file box contained even more. There was the original report from Ava's accident, Peter's first statement, correspondence from the insurance company, and a settlement letter signed by Ava's mother. The agreement did not admit wrongdoing, but it required the family to keep the amount and details confidential. There were also copies of Laura's letters to Chloe, still unopened, and printed court emails showing Daniel had received them. Chloe had grown up beside a box containing proof that her mother never abandoned her. Daniel had kept that truth, in the same place as the evidence that could destroy him. Karen warned me that none of the discoveries meant immediate charges or instant victory. Investigators still had to authenticate the files, interview witnesses, and determine which actions fell within criminal, civil, or child protection procedures. The evidence gave us a direction. It did not give us a finished case. That afternoon, Susan Caldwell sent the original version of her video. The metadata confirmed it had been recorded minutes after the fall. In the background, Ellie could be heard saying she could not feel part of her foot. Daniel answered, "You are standing, so you can walk." The pharmacy receipt filled another gap. Margaret had purchased adult-strength pain medication less than an hour after the accident. The investigators could now ask why she believed medication was necessary if she thought Ellie had suffered only a minor slip. Ellie's smartwatch provided a timeline of her body after the fall. Her heart rate spiked, remained elevated, and rose again each time the group moved. The step count showed she traveled more than 2 miles after the injury. The data could not prove what each person intended, but it contradicted the claim that Ellie calmly chose to continue. Peter agreed to give a formal statement. He provided the original email Laura sent, asking him to testify, and described how Daniel had replaced his incident notes. Then Denise Mercer contacted me. Her message was more cautious than before. "Ava has decided she wants to speak with your attorney. She does not want her medical history shared publicly, but she is tired of being described as dishonest." Karen arranged a private video call. Ava was 22 now. She had the steady voice of someone who had repeated a painful story enough times to remove emotion from the facts. She told us that her leg had been fractured near the knee. Walking after the fall damaged the growth plate and contributed to lasting instability. She gave up soccer and competitive running. "The worst part was not the pain," she said. "It was watching adults use the fact that I obeyed them as proof that I had never needed help." Ellie listened from the sofa with her doctor's permission. When Ava described Daniel taking a group photograph, Ellie covered her mouth. "They did the exact same thing," she whispered. Ava heard her. "That is why I am speaking now," she said. "I thought staying quiet would let me move on. It only gave them permission to do it again." Later that evening, DCF scheduled Ellie's formal interview. Boston police arranged separate appointments for Daniel, Margaret, Howard, and Chloe. No one would sit together. No one would hear the other's answers before giving their own. Daniel could no longer coordinate every pause, correction, and excuse. Before bed, Ellie asked me whether the evidence was enough to make everyone believe her. I sat beside her and took her hand. "You were telling the truth before we found any of it." "I know, but now they cannot say I imagined it." That was the cruelty of what my family had done. Ellie had needed documents, recordings, timestamps, witnesses, and another injured girl just to prove that her pain had been real. The following morning, Karen sent me a scanned copy of Daniel's report about Ellie, and placed it beside his final report about Ava. Whole sentences matched. The names and dates had changed, but the method had not. Daniel had believed the safest lie was the one that had worked before. He never considered that using it twice would become the clearest evidence against him. Ellie's formal interview took place 12 days after the fall. Her doctor agreed she was physically stable enough, but the DCF investigator allowed her to remain at home. A child interview specialist named Miss Brooks sat across from her in our living room while I waited in the kitchen, close enough to be available but far enough that no one could claim I influenced her answers. Before the interview began, Miss Brooks explained that Ellie did not need to guess, fill gaps, or protect anyone. If she could not remember something, she could simply say so. That instruction seemed to calm her more than any promise I had made. For years, my family had expected Ellie to produce the answer that caused the least trouble. Now an adult was telling her that uncertainty was allowed, and truth did not need to be convenient. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. I could not hear every word, but I heard Ellie describe the stone steps, Chloe reaching for her phone, and the moment she felt her ankle twist beneath her. She explained that Chloe said she had not meant to push her. She described Daniel taking the phone before checking the injury. She remembered Howard touching her ankle, Margaret pulling her upright, and Daniel ordering her to take several steps. When Miss Brooks asked why Ellie continued with the tour, my daughter answered without hesitation. "Because they told me Mom would be ashamed if I gave up." That sentence hurt more than the medical report. My family had used me as a weapon against my own child. They knew Ellie feared disappointing me, so they turned that fear into a way to keep her walking. After the interview, Miss Brooks came into the kitchen alone. She did not discuss every detail, but she said Ellie's account was internally consistent with the medical records, the recovered recording, and the timeline already provided. She also told me something I needed to hear. Children often comply with adults during dangerous situations. Compliance does not mean consent. Daniel's entire defense depended on the idea that Ellie had chosen to continue. The investigator understood what he pretended not to understand. A frightened 15-year-old surrounded by 3 controlling adults had not made a free decision. Boston police interviewed the adults separately over the next 2 days. I was not present, but Karen received limited information through the case process, and later explained what each person had claimed. Daniel repeated the account he had written. He said he had been speaking to guests when Ellie fell. He admitted taking her phone but described it as a business device containing confidential images. He insisted Chloe had told him Ellie grabbed her first. When the detective asked why the recovered audio contained his voice saying no ambulance, Daniel claimed the recording lacked context. He said he believed an ambulance would frighten Ellie, and that he planned to reassess her condition at the next stop. The detective then asked why the group passed several places where medical assistance could have been requested. Daniel said he did not remember the exact route. When shown Susan's video, he claimed he had used the phrase teenage dramatics because the entire group was becoming emotional. When asked why he copied language from Ava's report, he called it a standard business template. Every explanation created another question. Margaret's interview lasted less than an hour before she demanded an attorney. She said she had purchased pain medication as a precaution, not because she believed Ellie was seriously injured. She admitted telling Susan that she was Ellie's guardian, but claimed she meant she was the responsible adult for the day. When asked about the recording in which she referred to Ava, Margaret said she had been remembering an unrelated insurance matter. The detective asked why an unrelated case involved another teenage girl being forced to continue walking after an injury. Margaret stopped answering. Howard arrived for his interview carrying a folder. He had spent almost 2 weeks asking everyone else to protect him. That morning, he finally brought documents of his own. The folder contained printed messages from Daniel sent on the day of Ellie's fall. The first was time-stamped 23 minutes after the accident. "Do not call Rachel until Ellie calms down and completes enough of the route to show she is mobile." Another message was sent to both Howard and Margaret. "Everyone must remember she declined the ambulance and chose to continue." Howard had replied with one sentence. "She never declined. Margaret told the man to leave. Daniel responded, "Then, do not put that in writing." Howard had preserved the messages without telling anyone. He said he kept them because he was afraid Daniel might later blame him, not because he intended to help Ellie. Even his decision to save the evidence had begun as an act of self-protection. During the interview, Howard admitted he saw Chloe shove Ellie. He admitted the ankle was swollen and that he believed she needed medical attention. He admitted Daniel ordered the group photograph and explained why. When the detective asked why Howard obeyed, he said Margaret accused him of panicking, and Daniel warned that stopping the tour would trigger an investigation into the program. "Were you more concerned about the business than your granddaughter?" the detective asked. Howard tried to say he believed Ellie would be all right. Then the detective placed the photograph in front of him. Howard could see Ellie leaning against the railing while he stood only a few feet away. He began to cry. His tears did not erase what he had done. They only showed that he could no longer avoid looking at it. Chloe was interviewed with an advocate for minors present. Daniel was not allowed inside the room. At first, she followed part of the statement he had written. She said Ellie took pictures of private papers and refused to delete them. She said they argued near the stairs and both reached for the phone. Then the interviewer asked whether Ellie had grabbed Chloe first. Chloe said yes. The interviewer showed her the statement Daniel had prepared. It claimed Ellie grabbed the front of Chloe's jacket. Chloe had already told Miss Ramirez that Ellie grabbed her wrist. The inconsistency was small, but it exposed the danger of a memorized story. Chloe could remember what happened, or remember what Daniel wrote. She could not do both. The interviewer did not accuse her of lying. She asked Chloe to begin again and describe only what she personally remembered. This time, Chloe admitted she pushed Ellie. She said she wanted the phone because she saw photographs of Laura's letters and the Ava report. She feared Ellie would send them to me, and I would use them to destroy Daniel. "Who told you Rachel wanted to destroy your family?" the interviewer asked. "My dad and Grandma." "Did you intend for Ellie to fall down the steps?" "No. I wanted her to drop the phone." "What happened after she fell?" Chloe said Howard ran down first. Daniel took the phone. Margaret ordered Ellie to stand. When Ellie cried that she could not, Daniel told Chloe that one mistake did not need to ruin both their lives. Chloe believed that meant he would protect her. Then he made her repeat a story in which Ellie had slipped. She also described hearing Daniel discuss sending her to a boarding school if she refused to cooperate. He said the adults could deny seeing the shove, but Chloe would need to accept responsibility for an argument between teenagers. The interviewer asked when Chloe realized her father planned to blame her. When he told Grandma the business could survive a child making a mistake, but it could not survive adults refusing medical care. Daniel had understood the difference from the beginning. He knew Chloe's shove might be treated as the impulsive act of a frightened teenager. The adult's decision to conceal it, deny treatment, and manufacture evidence was harder to explain. That was why he separated the fall from everything that followed. Chloe also confirmed that Daniel removed the file box from Howard's study after the hospital reported the incident. He placed it in a storage room at the tour office, but Chloe retrieved it when he sent her to collect personal belongings before investigators arrived. She found Laura's unopened letters while searching the box for the original accident report. "I thought my mother never wrote to me," she told the interviewer. "My dad watched me believe that for 6 years." Laura gave her own statement separately. She submitted records of her custody petitions, returned packages, legal expenses, and the email asking Peter to testify. She explained that she had not remained silent. She had fought until Daniel's delays exhausted her savings and every accusation made her appear less stable. Ava and Peter provided sworn statements through Karen. Ava's medical records remained private except for the portions necessary to establish that delayed treatment caused lasting damage. No single witness knew everything. That made the combined evidence stronger. The same sequence appeared in accounts from people who had not spoken to one another. A teenage girl was injured. Daniel minimized the pain. Margaret attacked the girl's character. Howard recognized the danger, but stayed silent. The victim was kept moving, so photographs and observations could later be used against her. The pattern had occurred twice. 3 days after the final interviews, the Bennett Historical Walking Program received notice that its activities involving minors were temporarily suspended pending a safety review. The suspension did not come from DCF or the police. It came from the municipal office responsible for the program's permits after it received documentation of an unreported serious injury. The insurer opened a separate investigation into possible misrepresentation in both accident files. Daniel called me 17 times that afternoon. Margaret left 6 voicemails, accusing me of destroying my father's legacy. Howard sent 1 message. I told them everything. I did not congratulate him. Telling the truth after 12 days of concealment was better than continuing to lie, but it did not transform him into the person who had protected Ellie. It only meant he had finally stopped helping the people who hurt her. That evening, Daniel came to my house. I saw him through the window before he reached the porch. Karen had warned me not to meet with him alone, so I kept the door locked and called the police non-emergency line. He stood outside in the rain, pounding hard enough to wake Ellie. "Rachel, you need to understand what you have done," he shouted. 12 people may lose their jobs because you could not keep this inside the family. I remained behind the door. You made an injured child walk, so you could keep it inside the family. This is about Chloe now. If you continue, she will carry this for the rest of her life. You prepared a statement that placed everything on her. I was protecting the adults from an impulsive mistake. You were protecting yourself. His voice dropped. I will pay every medical bill. I will shut down the tour program myself. Just tell them the recording has been misunderstood. He was not apologizing. He was still trying to negotiate control of the story. I told him to leave. Before the police arrived, he said the one thing that finally revealed how little Ellie mattered to him. You already saved your daughter. Why do you need to punish the rest of us? He still believed taking Ellie to the hospital had completed my responsibility. He did not understand that protecting her also meant ensuring they could never do this to another child. When Daniel left, I found Ellie sitting upright in the study. She had heard him. "Is the program closing because of me?" she asked. "No. It is being investigated because adults lied about 2 injured girls." She looked down at her leg. "What happens next?" I sat beside her and answered honestly. "I do not know everything. The investigations will take time. Some people may face legal consequences. Others may lose jobs or access to the program. Nothing will happen as quickly as television makes it look. Will they ever admit what they did? Some of them may never admit it." Ellie thought about that before asking her final question. "Then how do we win?" I looked at the crutches beside her mattress, the medication schedule on the table, and the messages we had spent days preserving. We stop needing their confession before we believe the truth. The temporary suspension of the tour program did not end the investigation. It only removed Daniel's ability to place more children under the supervision of the same adults while the facts were being reviewed. Within a week, the program's insurer notified him that it would not provide a defense for any conduct found to involve deliberate concealment, destruction of evidence, or knowingly false reports. The letter did not declare him guilty. It warned that the policy might not protect him from consequences created by intentional acts. Daniel had spent years believing insurance would place distance between his choices and their cost. For the first time, he understood that the company might leave him standing alone. The Municipal Safety Office requested records from every tour involving minors during the previous 8 years. The request included incident reports, staff notes, photographs, medical complaints, and correspondence with parents. Ava's accident was no longer an isolated file hidden inside Howard's study. Investigators were comparing it with every report Daniel had submitted. Karen told me the process would take months. There would be no single afternoon when an official announced every consequence. Different questions belonged to different systems. Police were reviewing the shove, the missing phone, and the altered records. DCF was examining the actions of the adults responsible for Ellie. The insurer was investigating whether Daniel had misrepresented 2 claims. Ava's attorney was considering whether the old settlement could be challenged based on concealed evidence. The delays frustrated Ellie. She had expected the truth to create immediate clarity. Instead, every answer produced another interview request or form. "Why do they need more proof?" she asked one afternoon. "They heard the recording." "Because they have to prove what each person knew and chose to do." "They knew I was hurt." "I know." I understood her anger. Ellie had been required to provide more evidence than any child should need. Still, a careful investigation was better than the kind of rushed judgment Daniel had always used against other people. The family outside our house was collapsing faster than the legal process. Margaret stopped speaking to Howard after learning he had given police the messages Daniel sent on the day of the fall. She moved into Daniel's guest room and told relatives that her husband had betrayed her while she was under emotional pressure. Howard remained in their house alone. He sent letters to me and Ellie. I read mine. It was 8 pages of apologies mixed with explanations about Margaret's temper, Daniel's pressure, and his fear of losing the family business. He admitted that he saw Chloe push Ellie. He admitted that he knew her ankle was swelling. He wrote that he wanted to call me, but Daniel said I would destroy the program before they understood the injury. Every explanation returned to the same fact. Howard knew a child needed help and chose the comfort of the adults around him. Ellie asked whether she had to read his letter. "No. What if he really is sorry? You can believe he is sorry and still decide you are not ready to hear him." I placed the unopened envelope in a drawer. It belonged to Ellie, but she did not owe Howard access to her mind, simply because he had finally decided to use honest words. Margaret did not apologize. She left voicemail saying she had acted according to the information available. She accused the hospital of exaggerating the effect of the delayed treatment. She said teenagers often recovered from broken bones, and that our family should not be destroyed over one bad afternoon. Her refusal to understand was almost useful. I had spent years waiting for the right explanation to make her see my pain. Now I knew no perfect sentence existed. Daniel changed his approach every few days. First he blamed me. Then he blamed the weather. After Chloe's interview, he blamed Laura for poisoning his daughter against him. When none of those stories stopped the investigations, he asked Karen to arrange a private settlement meeting. Karen advised me to attend only if she remained present, and everything was documented. Daniel arrived with his attorney and a proposed agreement. He offered to pay Ellie's medical expenses, future physical therapy, counseling, and an additional amount for her education. In return, I would agree not to pursue civil claims against the program and would state publicly that the adults had misunderstood the seriousness of the injury. The agreement also required us not to discuss Ava, Laura's letters, or the original reports. Daniel slid the papers toward me. "This protects Ellie's future," he said. "It protects your past. You have already stopped the program. What more do you want? I want the truth to remain available to every investigator examining what you did." His attorney warned him not to respond. But Daniel continued. "Ava's case was settled. Laura's custody fight has nothing to do with you. You are combining unrelated events because anger feels better than admitting Ellie and Chloe had a fight. You copied Ava's report. I used standard language. You ordered both girls to remain mobile so you could argue they were not seriously injured. That is your interpretation. The recording contains your words." He looked at Karen, then back at me. "If you reject this, Chloe may face consequences too." There it was again. He used his daughter only when he needed a shield. "You wrote the statement that blamed her," I said. "You were prepared to sacrifice Chloe before she stopped protecting you." His face hardened. "She pushed Ellie. I did not. You made the injury worse. You took the phone. You created the report. You told everyone what to say. I was trying to save the program. You chose the program after a child was already lying at the bottom of the stairs." Daniel ended the meeting by withdrawing the offer. 2 days later, DCF approved a supervised family meeting requested by Howard and Margaret. Ellie was not required to attend. A therapist would be present and she could leave at any moment. I expected her to refuse. Instead, she said she wanted to speak once. I do not want them telling everyone I was too afraid to face them. You do not have to prove courage to anyone. I know. I just want to say it where they cannot interrupt me. The meeting took place in a neutral counseling office. Daniel was not permitted to attend because of the active investigation and his recent attempt to contact us directly. Margaret and Howard sat on opposite sides of the room. Margaret looked tired, but not humbled. Howard appeared smaller than I remembered. Ellie entered on crutches and sat beside me. The therapist explained that she could stop the meeting whenever she wished. Howard began crying before Ellie spoke. "I am so sorry," he said. "I should have protected you." Ellie looked at him. "You knew I was hurt." "Yes." "You heard me ask for Mom." "Yes." "You still let them take my phone and make me walk." Howard lowered his head. "I was afraid." "So was I." He had no answer. Margaret leaned forward. "We all made mistakes that day, but Chloe did not intend for you to fall. Daniel was trying to keep everyone calm, and you were able to complete the tour." Ellie's hands tightened around the grips of her crutches. "The doctor said walking made the fracture worse." "We did not know that." "You did not need to know exactly what was broken. You only needed to believe me when I said I could not walk." Margaret glanced at the therapist. "I am not saying we handled everything perfectly. You told a stranger not to call an ambulance. I believed you were panicking. You told everyone you were my guardian. I was responsible for you. No, Mom trusted you to keep me safe. That is not what you did." Margaret's expression changed. For the first time, Ellie was not asking for her approval or trying to soften the truth. "You are allowing adults to turn you against your family," she said. Ellie took a slow breath. The fall was not the worst part. The room became quiet. The worst part was looking at each of you and realizing you could see I was in pain. Grandpa touched my ankle. You bought medicine. Uncle Daniel took pictures. You all knew something was wrong, and you still told me to keep walking. Howard covered his face. Margaret remained still. "You keep saying family should forgive mistakes," Ellie continued. "A mistake would have been not understanding at first. You had 3 hours to change your minds. Every time I asked for help, you made the same choice again." Margaret began to say that the family had been under pressure, but the therapist stopped her. Ellie was not finished. "I do not forgive you right now. I do not know whether I ever will. I am not saying that to punish you. I am saying it because you do not get to decide when I feel safe again." She stood carefully with my help. Margaret looked at me. "You are letting a child destroy this family." I answered before Ellie could carry that burden. "No. The family began falling apart when 3 adults decided that protecting a lie mattered more than protecting her. We left without waiting for another apology." Outside the office, Ellie's hands were shaking. I asked whether she wanted to sit down. She nodded. For once, no one told her to take another step. We stopped beside the entrance until she was ready to move again. 6 months after Ellie fell, the legal process was still moving, but our lives were no longer organized around Daniel's next lie. The Bennett Historical Walking Program never reopened under his management. The municipal review found repeated failures to report injuries, inadequate emergency procedures, and altered internal records. Daniel lost the permits required to operate tours involving minors, and the insurer refused to cover claims connected to intentional concealment. Boston police submitted its findings to the district attorney. Daniel faced allegations related to withholding Ellie's phone, interfering with medical assistance, and providing false information about the incident. Margaret was investigated for misrepresenting herself as Ellie's legal guardian and preventing a bystander from calling emergency services. The process did not move quickly, and no single decision repaired everything. Hearings were postponed. Attorneys requested more documents. Every agency used different language for the same choices my family had made. Daniel called them misunderstandings. Margaret called them errors in judgment. The records called them deliberate actions. Ava's attorney successfully reopened discussions about the old settlement after the original notes proved that critical information had been withheld. Ava did not want public attention, but she wanted the official record corrected. The final safety report was amended to state that she had requested medical help and had been pressured to continue walking despite signs of a serious injury. When Ava told Ellie about the correction, my daughter smiled for the first time that day. "At least they cannot call her a liar anymore," she said. Ava had lost years of running, and part of her trust in adults. No report could return those things, but the truth now carried her name instead of Daniel's version of it. Laura's case moved more carefully. The letters from the file box, Daniel's court emails, and Chloe's statement gave her attorney grounds to request a new review of visitation arrangements. The court did not simply return Chloe to her mother as though the previous 6 years could be erased. Chloe was 16, angry, frightened, and unsure which memories belonged to her and which had been shaped by Daniel. She began exchanging letters with Laura through a therapist. Laura did not demand forgiveness. She answered questions, admitted where her own anxiety had affected their relationship, and provided copies of every letter she had tried to send. Chloe remained responsible for pushing Ellie. Her case was handled through the juvenile system. She entered a supervised diversion program that included counseling, accountability sessions, and community service. She was ordered to stay away from Ellie, unless Ellie later chose otherwise. Some relatives complained that Chloe was being punished even though Daniel had manipulated her. "I told them manipulation," explained her fear. "It did not erase the moment she used both hands to shove my daughter near a flight of stone stairs. Understanding someone's pain did not require asking the person they hurt to absorb the consequences." Chloe wrote Ellie an apology through her counselor. The letter did not ask for a reply. She admitted that she had seen Ellie struggling to stand and had remained silent because she believed protecting Daniel would keep her safe. She also admitted that when Daniel took the phone, part of her felt relieved. Ellie read the letter once and placed it in the same drawer as Howard's. She did not answer either of them. Howard continued sending messages every few weeks. He moved out of the house he shared with Margaret and began counseling on his own. He told me he finally understood that avoiding conflict had never made him neutral. His silence had always helped the person with more power. I believed he understood more than before. I still did not give him access to Ellie. Regret was not the same as repair. Repair required patience, honesty, and acceptance that the person harmed might never restore the relationship. Margaret remained with Daniel. She continued telling relatives that I had used Ellie's injury to destroy the family. Several people stopped repeating her story after they read the official findings. Others continued to support her because admitting the truth would force them to question years of favoritism. I stopped trying to convince them. For most of my life, I had believed that if I explained myself calmly enough, my mother would eventually understand. The investigation taught me that some people did not misunderstand the truth. They rejected it because the lie protected the life they wanted. Ellie's recovery was slower than either of us hoped. The fracture healed, but the muscles around her ankle had weakened. Her balance was poor, and certain movements caused sharp pain. The doctor said she might regain full function, but he could not promise she would return to long mountain hikes without discomfort. The news devastated her. Hiking had been one of the few traditions that belonged only to us and Michael. Every spring we chose a trail, packed too many snacks, and argued over who had forgotten the sunscreen. After he died, those trips became a way of carrying him with us without turning every memory into grief. Ellie had already chosen the trail she wanted to attempt the following summer. Now she could not walk across the physical therapy room without watching every step. During her first month of rehabilitation, she treated every exercise like a test she could fail. If the therapist asked for 8 repetitions, Ellie attempted 10. If pain began at 6, she hit it until her face changed. One afternoon, she stood between 2 support rails and tried to shift her weight onto the injured leg. Her ankle shook. The therapist told her to stop, but Ellie tightened her grip and tried again. "I can do it," she said. Her voice sounded exactly as it had when she apologized for needing help in the hospital. I stepped closer. You do not have to prove that. If I stop every time it hurts, I will never get stronger. There is a difference between safe discomfort and pain that tells you something is wrong. That is what Grandma said. She said I needed to push through it. The room became quiet. I understood then that Daniel and Margaret had not only injured her leg, they had damaged her ability to trust her own body. Every time Ellie felt pain, she questioned whether it was real enough to deserve attention. The therapist asked her to rate the pain. Ellie admitted it was a 7 out of 10. We ended the exercise. She cried in the car because she believed stopping meant she had failed. I turned off the engine and waited until she looked at me. The strongest thing you did after the fall was not finishing that tour, I said. It was telling the doctor what happened. Strength is not how much pain you can hide. She wiped her face. What if I never hike again? Then we will find something else that belongs to us. What if I can hike, but I have to stop all the time? Then we stop. She looked out the window. You will not be disappointed? I will be disappointed in myself if I ever make you believe my love depends on how far you can walk. From that day, recovery changed. It did not become easier, but it became honest. Ellie told the therapist when something hurt. She rested when she needed to rest. Some weeks she made progress. Other weeks swelling forced her to return to simpler exercises. She began seeing a counselor who helped her separate guilt from responsibility. She learned that saying no did not make her cruel. Setting a boundary did not mean she was punishing someone. Being related to a person did not give that person unlimited access to her life. I attended counseling too. I had to accept that my parents' choices were not my fault, but my old habit of minimizing them had affected Ellie. I could not repair that by becoming perfect or by promising she would never be hurt again. I could only become someone she could trust when she said she was hurting. 7 months after the surgery, Ellie returned to the walking trail near our neighborhood. It was flat and less than half a mile long. Nothing like the mountain routes we once planned. She used one trekking pole and wore a supportive brace beneath her jeans. We walked slowly. At the halfway point, her steps became uneven. She stopped beside a wooden bench and looked at me, with the same uncertainty I had seen in the therapy room. My ankle is starting to hurt. Then we can rest. We are almost at the end. The end will still be there. She studied my face, searching for disappointment. Then she sat down. We watched leaves move across the path while a family passed us with a dog. No one accused her of delaying them. No one photographed her standing. No one told her pain was a performance. After several minutes, Ellie decided she had walked far enough for the day. We turned back. She did not finish the trail, but she reached the car smiling. For the first time since the fall, stopping did not feel like defeat. It felt like freedom.